Hello, and welcome back to Level 1 Sewing. I am Carey with Devil May Care, and I'm making this little series just to help anybody who's getting started with sewing, having trouble learning how to sew, or is just interested in what I have to say. Last time, I showed you how to read a pattern, and we went over some of the very basic information that's on a pattern. Don't worry, we'll be visiting that pattern again. But today, I want to talk about fabric, and I don't know, can you see all the fabric that I've got littered around me? Yes. We're going to be talking about all the different kinds of fabric that, well, let me take that back. Not all the different kinds of fabric that there are, because there are a lot. There are lots and lots of fabrics. I'm just going to be talking about some of the ones I have here on the table and giving you an idea of some of the differences between different kinds of fabric, how useful they are, what they're best for, that sort of thing. So here, let me see if I can give you a better view. All right, this is a great big pile of mess. Yes, I realize that. Let's start with some of the easiest things. These right here, and these look like two very, very different fabrics. They're not. They're not that different at all. I'm going to try and get a piece of it all by itself. This right here, and I realize that just showing it to you really doesn't make that much difference. You really need to be able to feel it and touch it and that sort of thing. And if you're interested, the way that a fabric feels, how heavy it is, how much it moves, just how it feels, that's called the hand of a fabric. That's worth memorizing or not, depending on what you plan to do with it. But the way a fabric feels is called its hand. And this is a very medium hand fabric. This is just a cotton broadcloth. That's all it is. If you see fabric on sale in Walmart or Michael's for $1 a yard, it's probably going to be this stuff. If it comes in awesome characters, Ninja Turtles, Star Wars, John Deere tractors, it's probably cotton broadcloth. This is very, very common. It's also very, very easy to work with. Very easy to work with. If you decide to fold it like this and crease it, it actually creases fairly well. It irons out again very easily. It doesn't fray as badly. Look at the edge of this. I don't know, can you see the edge of that there? When I run my finger across it like that, it frays a little bit because it's woven, but it doesn't fray that badly by comparison to some of the things you're going to see. So cotton broadcloth is a very beginner friendly fabric. It really is. And you can get it in a wide range. This right here, this crazy pattern, is also a cotton broadcloth. You see, the fraying edge is maybe a little bit worse, but not by much. Not by much. So, and don't worry, that fraying business is something to consider when dealing with fabric, but it is not a deal breaker. All fabric, for the most part, is going to have something like that it'll either fray or it'll melt or there'll be something about it that'll make it difficult. That's those. Higher up on the hand scale of the same family as cotton broadcloth is this stuff right here. This is canvas or duck cloth, if you have heard either of those. And I know you probably know what canvas is. That one's another fairly common one. This doesn't hardly ravel at all. This stuff is really sturdy and really stable, but it is very, very heavy. Well, not as heavy as some things, but on the range of fabrics, it is quite heavy. So you want to make sure you've got a good sturdy needle to sew this with when you're on your machine. Most machines can handle it though. It's not like you've got to go out and get a special heavy-duty machine just to be able to sew canvas. It's not that big a deal, but it is a great deal sturdier. It's great for things like pants and coats and even belts. You can fold it over on itself a couple of times, give it some top stitching, and it's a nice sturdy belt. This stuff is very good. Very rarely will you find canvas in prints, wild, crazy stuff like this. It can happen, it just doesn't happen very often. And the range of colors that canvas will come in tends to be a bit more limited, especially as compared to its weaker brother, the cotton broadcloth. Now, moving away from the very sturdy things like that, we have something that's a great deal lighter. This, and you'll notice it has a bit of shine, this is lining material. I believe it is also officially called some kind of broadcloth. It's got a technical name. I call it lining material because that's what it's used for. It has a sheen. It's not nearly as shiny as it might look on the camera there. It's a subtle shine. It's not like a satin. This stuff right here, which is costume satin, can you see the difference in the shine? This stuff is it's crazy, whereas this is more of a soft sheen. Lining material, and you see how I'm running my hands over it. Can you feel how soft that is? It's very soft, has a silkness to it. But look at the edge, look at that. It frays. It frays pretty badly. And part of that is because the threads that are woven into this are much finer than the broadcloth or the canvas. They're just finer, smaller threads, and they will unravel a good deal easier. This is the stuff that you use for, well, lining. That's why it's called lining material. You line your vests, your coats, your sometimes pants, depending, purses, this with lining material. Most costumes don't have linings. This right here is one of the things that separates costumes from actual clothing. When you make a jacket or a vest as a costume, it's generally going to be one layer. It's going to have raw edges on the inside because you're not worried about it lasting very long. You just want it to be a costume. You wear it for a day and then forget about it. A vest that you're going to wear maybe a couple of days a week or out to fine dining, it's going to have a lining. It's going to be properly finished. That's just one of the things that separates the men from the boys, as it were. I like to line all of my stuff, especially coats. Especially coats, I like to line them because they go on over other layers of clothes, and having the lining actually makes it easier to get the coat on and off over all the other layers of whatever else you're doing. Let's see, where do we... Well, since I mentioned the satin, we'll talk about the satin. This right here is not real satin. This is actually costume satin. There is a difference. For one thing, price. Costume satin is significantly cheaper. It is one that goes on sale quite frequently at clothing stores, listen to me, at places like Michael's and Joann's and whatnot. You'll find this on sale a lot. If I'm not mistaken, the shiny stuff that exists in like the Yaya Han cosplay section is going to be costume satin. You can get it with all the weird patterns and stuff like that on it as well. It's good stuff. It looks really nice. It's really cheap. The biggest issue with it is the same thing that the lining material does. It frays. It frays badly. Costume satin is one of the worst fraying fabrics that I have come across. And it will fray so bad, like it unravels so bad that it'll actually pull the seams apart. If you don't take a big enough seam allowance or finish your seams out with a nice roll and all that kind of stuff to seal them properly, it will actually pull. The seams will actually pull apart, and then you'll be hulking out of your costume, even if you made it the right size. So this stuff takes some patience to work with. It's very workable. It's very effective. I've made quite a few things out of it. But you've got to remember just how tricky it is. It's very fussy. Moving on along with the shiny things. This right here is something called Twinkle or organza, depending on how you have seen it written. Twinkle, I think, is an older term. You'll notice it's kind of sheer, so this is definitely not something to make your pants out of all by itself. But it does have this nice sheen to it, this nice shininess. And there are some twinkles or organzas, whichever you want to call it. I'm going to call it twinkle because that's what I've always called it. There are some variations of this fabric that are very twinkly, hence the name. They've got almost a sparkle to them. And some of them do actually come with some sparkles. You can get them with cut lace over them or even velvet velour type things on them. You see this used a lot in what are they? Those things that brides wear. Wedding dresses. That. Yes, can you tell that's not something I deal with much? But this stuff is very, very good for giving kind of an ethereal sort of quality. You see it's almost ghostly while I'm moving it around on there. It's great for things like elves and princesses and that sort of thing. But it also unravels pretty badly. And it itches. It itches. But don't even think for a second that I'm joking about this. This stuff, you see how that seam is rolled and encased, and you see no little thingy sticking out anywhere? There's a reason for that. This stuff itches like crazy. If even one little thread is sticking out somewhere, and it happens to be somewhere sensitive, like around your neck or down your side, it will bug you forever. It will, and I'm getting a bit adamant about that because I have suffered that myself. I have worn nice, very fitted dresses with this stuff on them that have every single seam in them is just not finished properly, and I'll come out of that dress looking like I've got some kind of allergic reaction. It's horrible. So this is another fabric that is beautiful, and you can do wonderful, wonderful things with it, but you've got to be careful with it, you've got to be patient with it, and you do have to take your time to make sure you finish it properly, or you're going to be miserable. Okay. Moving away from those things, now let's grab some laces, because lace is another sheer but wonderful thing. We've got, and there's all different kinds of laces. I'm trying to hold myself up as something to a nice white background so you can see. Here is a lace. This is a very soft lace. This is a very light lace, and you can see it's a very subtle patterning on it as I'm moving it over my skin so you can see. And we also have this right here, which is, I think this is called an eyelet lace, if I remember correctly. It's much heavier, much denser, and it's a bit old world looking. You kind of get the idea of maybe Dutch or something like that from a lace like this. And we even have, buried over here, a project I'm currently working on. This is actually a lace overlay. This is lace, I'm going to try and separate it a little bit if I can. This is lace that I have put over some lining material to give this effect. But this is actually two different materials. And the lace is what's on top. And this, if you see closely, this lace actually has metallic threads in the pattern of it. So it's shiny as well. You got lots and lots of variations of lace. Lots of different kinds of lace. And lace is wonderful. It's beautiful stuff. And you can use it, I like using it as an overlay where you put it over top of another fabric and you get a nice texture. It just richens and deepens whatever it is you put it over. You can take just a simple, plain, boring cotton broadcloth and a piece of lace and put the lace over the broadcloth, and now you have a whole new kind of thing. Look at the shine on this. This becomes a really wonderfully expensive looking piece of material, and it started out as the buck a yard stuff that we got on sale. So lace is a wonderfully useful thing, and for the most part it's easy to use depending on the kind of lace. This right here is just a simple cotton lace, very, very easy to use. Very easy to use. This stuff over here, it's a little bit fussier. The metallic thread that's woven in here definitely makes it want to fight back, it makes it want to fray, and it makes it itch. So this is another one to make sure that you seal it properly. But all lace is really good to make sure that your seams and your edges are very, very closely contained, because it's such a loose weave. Look at that. You don't have the solid interwoven fibers with this that you have with the other. There's a lot of space in there, and everywhere that there's space between fibers, there's a place that it can pull loose and pull out and come undone. Okay, moving right along. I don't have any spandex here available, or I would absolutely show you that, because I know that spandex and lycra and stretchy things, very popular stuff to use. They're also very aggravating to use because of the stretch. Not necessarily because they're like this, they want to unravel. Most stretchy things don't necessarily come unraveled. See this right here? This has been sitting over there on the edge of the table for a while, and it hasn't come undone. It's pretty well locked. But this stuff is, what is this called again? Stretch pan velvet. That's what it's called. And it's something that you may find and use quite a bit. It's got this pretty texture. It's very soft and fun to touch, and it, other way, stretches. It has a good stretch to it. Now, you saw I just turned that. This is a one-way stretch. So if we have a square piece of material, you notice that it stretches pretty significantly in that direction. If I turn it a quarter in one direction, it doesn't stretch as much. I mean, there's a little, but and I'm pulling it really hard. It does not stretch as much in the other direction. That's just how it's woven. That's how it goes together. It stretches a lot in one direction, not in the other. One-way stretch. Spandex and lycra, things that just expand in all directions, that's called a two-way stretch. Pretty simple. It'll stretch no matter which direction you turn it. The problem with stretchy fabric when it comes to sewing is it will want to stretch. As it's pulling through the presser foot, as it's going through the machine, it will want to stretch and leave itself behind. And when you have stitches, thread, that don't stretch, sewing down a piece of material that does stretch, whenever that stretch reconstricts again, it's going to be all warbled and weird. So it's very usable. Definitely something that you can do a lot of cool stuff with, but it's another one you got to be patient with. It's not very user-friendly. You've got to take your time and really keep an eye on it. And this stuff here, moving swiftly on, this has a little bit of stretch, but not a lot. It's kind of a one-way stretch. This stuff right here is a jersey, and if I remember correctly, this is a lycra cotton blend jersey, but all jersey fabrics, it's called jersey, it refers to the way that it's woven. And this stuff is wonderful. I love it. It's do you see the way it's kind of falling and draping? It's beautiful. It makes wonderful robes and capes and things like that. And it's actually quite light. Let me see if I can I hold it up and you can see? No, you can't quite tell from there how light it is. It's very thin, very light. It's very airy. This is one of those things you can make a huge robe out of it and not sweat to death because it lets a fair amount of airflow go through. This is actually what I'm going to be using for the shirt that we're making for the rest of the project. This is what I'm going to be making it out of for exactly that reason. It's light, it's airy, and another good thing, it's sturdy. This stuff is tough. It can take a beating and bounce right back from it, which is definitely something we need for the individual that we are trying to clothe. that vampire I might have mentioned, spoilers, yes, he's rough on his clothes. That's what we're going to be using for that. And you see how nice and bright and white it is? It's really hard to stain this. It can happen, but it's difficult. So this jersey is really good stuff, especially a blend. Any kind of cotton poly or cotton lycra blend, really good, just all around. But that's me. This right here, this is actually a pair of pants that I grabbed so that I can show you the fabric. This fabric is a gabardine, and that also has to do with the way it's woven. It's very, very heavy. I believe this is a polyester gabardine. It's thick, heavy stuff, but it has a nice finished look to it. So this, well, just like it is on a pair of pants, it's really good for pants, for coats, that sort of thing. You tend not to find gabardines with patterns on them or anything like that. It may have a pattern woven into it, but it'll be very, very subtle. Most of the time you see this used for men's clothes of some sort, and it is very good for that. It's very sturdy. Not necessarily very breathable, but it also does not fray all that badly, and it's quite user-friendly. This stuff right here, this is a piece this is actually a mistake piece off of one of our Devil May Care projects I made a while back. But I wanted to show you this stuff because this right here is something that is very tempting to get and use, especially for armor. This is a imitation leather or vinyl sort of thing. This is actually upholstery material. I believe this is supposed to be all weather or exterior. But if you look close, ooh, maybe you can tell. See, it's got some texturing in it, some leather grain looking stuff in it. It's actually got a really nice faux leather look to it. However, and it's good stuff, don't get me wrong, and it's definitely cheaper than leather and easier to get, but it is a pain in the butt. Let me show you the other side of it. This right here is the back side of it. This is a very heavy weave, I'm not even sure, it's some kind of polyester blend, heavy woven. And then this side of it, can you see the edge? Can you see that? It's actually a coating. So you have essentially got two different kinds of materials here. You've got this heavy woven polyester stuff, and then you've got this, which is basically just like a latex vinyl coating that has been painted over the top of it. The reason you need to know that, the reason it's important to know that, is because when you, like here, when you poke, oh no, you can't see it. When you poke holes in this stuff, the holes stay there. When you're sewing on a fabric, any kind of woven fabric, and you push the needle between the woven threads of the fabric, if you take the thread back out, the holes will just close themselves back up because you've simply created space between the woven threads. You haven't actually damaged anything. This stuff is another story. When you poke a hole in this, that hole stays. It doesn't go anywhere because you haven't just forced the needle between the woven threads of the fabric, you've actually punctured the top layer. So this stuff does not lend itself well to being stitched and then seam ripped and stitched and removed, and it's difficult stuff all the way around. And it has a very heavy hand, very heavy hand. This is not the easiest stuff to make like coats or hoods or capes out of, just because it does not want to cooperate. This is good for armor, covering armor, making leather looking armor, very stiff things that you don't need to move, maybe even like corsets or vests, vest armor, that sort of thing. You can get away with making jackets out of it if you know what you're doing, but it is tricky stuff to work with. Now that has, one more thing I want to show you just because I mentioned it. This right here is interfacing. This is specifically a lightweight iron-on interfacing, and the way, let me see, can you see? I don't know, can you see the little dots from there? No, it doesn't look like you can. This has, one side is very soft and smooth, the other side is very knobbly. It's got all these little teeny tiny dots on it. Those dots are heat-activated glue, and you cut a piece of this out, iron it dot side down on the wrong side or the ugly side of your fabric, and this will help reinforce it. That's one way to deal with things like the costume satin and the Twinkle, things that are very lightweight, that will want to unravel easily, that aren't very heavy-handed. If you want costume satin to behave more like real satin, iron-on interfacing on the back of it is a great way to accomplish that. I just wanted to make sure I showed you the interfacing because it is actually referenced in the pattern we're going to be using, and I do believe I'm going to be using it. Now then, I have taken up all of the time talking about fabric, which is exactly what I meant to do. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, there are a lot of different kinds of fabric. There's a lot more I could say about fabric. There's also all of the notions, little sundry things like zippers and buttons and elastics and all of that stuff. There's a lot of different materials that are available for use. I can go more in depth in that in another episode or in another series if you're interested. If you have a simple question, just one little question, something I didn't go over, something I said that doesn't make sense, leave me a comment and ask, and I will be sure to get back with you and let you know. If it's a big enough deal, I'll address it in a future episode. Thank you again for stopping by, And I'll see you next time.